I am a project director at the Renewables Academy RENAC, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. Meanwhile, we wait until everybody comes in. I want to, before some more people join us, here is some short poll. We would be interested in you taking part in this poll. If you like, we would just want to know in which area of activity you are involved, just to see, are you from the transport sector, renewable energies, media, information, public awareness, university. Oh, I see you. This is not compulsory. You can take part in that if you wish, but you do not have to, of course. Okay, so, it's all the people most people are involved into renewable energy business or in the sector in one way or another. With some information and public awareness. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's interesting to see how that disseminates, how that is distributed. And I have a second one before I go with you through the agenda. What type of organizations do you work in? Is that more a governmental EU institution? Is it EU? Or an energy agency? Are you associated to a university? Let's see. Or directly from the industry or from the media. Okay, we see some research university institutions is the majority of our viewers here. Thanks, yeah, good. Interesting to see which backgrounds you come from. Right, just a note before I start. This webinar will be recorded, so people who cannot join here or who have to leave earlier have the opportunity to join us later or to view that on our website. Also, these slides that we are going to present you will be shared later, so you have the opportunity to have a look at that later on. Also, you see on the bottom right, there's a chat for everyone, and I would like to encourage you that you write some questions that occur to you into this chat. So at the end of this webinar, in 40 minutes or so, we have the opportunity to give you answers to your questions. So use the chat function in the top right corner at the bottom and type in your questions, and we try to get back to that. Right. So, your speakers today, I want to briefly introduce our team, which are presenting in the next minutes. We do that step by step. So, my name is Roman Buss. I'm the moderator. I will soon hand over to the project lead, Diane Lescaut. She has been coordinating this project for nearly 20 years now. Also, Frédéric Thuyer has joined our presenters database. He will give us some insights on the energy indicators. Karol Kemper from Frankfurt School, he will speak briefly about the results concerning investment indicators. Then there's our colleagues Luc Broskens and Sam Lambou from TNO Energy Transition, that is formerly ECN, and they have been partner in this project for long. And last but not least, Barbara Breitschopf from Fraunhofer EC will speak about innovation, trade and flexibility. So what we are going to do in the next 45 minutes is to give you a glimpse on the report that we have provided in the different chapters and sections, and very briefly give you the key results of our report concerning energy indicators, socio-economic indicators, employment and turnover, investment, costs, avoided fuels, heating, trade and flexibility of the electricity system. So that will take us around 40 minutes, and then we have 10 to 50 minutes time for your questions and to respond to that. That is the agenda. I hope that is fine. So it is my pleasure to hand over to Diane, and she will give us a glimpse on this project, what we have done so far over the last years and where we're coming from and where we're going. Diane, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me fine?
Perfectly fine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Roman, for this introduction and the poll you carried out with our attendees. I would like to welcome all of you as well as project coordinator. Just a few words about EurObserv'ER. It's an association for the promotion and study of renewable energy sources and their deployment in France and Europe. It was founded in 1980. Observer founded the EurObserv'ER barometer in 1999. And we have been coordinating this project since then. The EurObserv'ER barometers have been financially supported by the European Commission since 20 years in various contractual forms. The aim of the project is to provide technical support to the EC in the monitoring and of the deployment of RES in the EU and in each of the individual member states. The project delivers indicators, analysis, graphs in order to cover all actions that are impacted by RES developments, energy production, cost, investments, employment and turnover, and trade. As you see, our team publishes two kinds of barometers, the thematic barometers and what we call the overview barometers, but that are called the state of renewable energies in Europe. So the thematic barometers focus on one RES technology only and are published every 2 months. The overview barometers are published annually in February. These publications target a large public, as we have seen in the poll at the beginning: policymakers, public bodies, RES industry, manufacturers, people who develop projects, promotion organizations, researchers, teachers, students, and people from the media. Since project start, we have published 137 thematic barometers, and we have released our 19th overview barometer last February. The thematic barometers, which we publish every 2 months, they deliver the most up-to-date energy indicators and trends in policy and industry sector on one of the 8 sectors we follow: wind power, PV, solar thermal and CSP, biofuels, heat pumps, biogas, solid biomass. We provide energy indicators for the previous year, thanks to data collection throughout a network of sources that we have identified during our years of work on this topic. Policies are surveyed in order to account for specific development of some specific countries where we see changes from one year to the other. And we highlight the trends that are at work in the industry, research movements in developers or among manufacturers. We compare our estimated predictions with the 2020 target, and we also have included since last year some idea of where we will stand regarding the next landmark of 2030. Our publication schedule is the following. We have just released the wind power barometer in February. The photovoltaic barometer is now under study. We will release it at the end, before the end of the month, and then we will have 5 more barometers until the end of the year, where you see them now. We have released the overview barometer with information that we compile from the thematic barometers, and as well we develop additional topics that are not covered in the thematic barometers. The results of these topics will be presented in the rest of this webinar to you. Just 2 words about our website, which is very useful since you can download all barometers, all our publications from it. there's a press area which regroups all graphs and tables of the thematic barometers, so you can use them freely from there. And you have also an interactive database where you can retrieve downloadable Excel files with all data from the thematic and annual barometer. It has just been completed with all data from the last 19th overview barometer. Barometers are translated and disseminated in French thanks to the support of the French Energy Agency, ADEME, as well. And I have to mention that in 2019, we have counted more than 91,000 downloads from the various documents that are uploaded on our project's website, so it's very much visited. And I invite you to have a look at all that there is, since we have also policy files there and a lot of other documents. And now we would like to share with you the main results of the latest issue of our annual publication, The State of Renewable Energies in Europe. And I leave the
Thank you very much, Diane. So I hand over to Frédéric Thuillier, who's also working for Observer in Paris, France. He will let us know some results on the energy indicators. Frédéric, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. Thank you, Roman. So I'm going to briefly highlight some results from the energy chapter on our last edition of the State of Renewables in Europe. So on this chapter, each renewable sector is presented through energy indicators about capacity installed, total capacity per rating, or energy generated. 12 renewable technologies are covered and figures are given for each member state. This project is building on the know-how acquired through 20 years of experience of data collection and creation of a network of experts throughout the EU members. So on this first slide, there is a results about energy indicators. As every year, energy chapter ends with a review of each member state's position regarding the renewable energy development status. So concerning the electricity generation, the results for 2018 was a production of 32 point of the total electricity generated in EU 28. 1 year before, this share was 30.7. And last in 2019, 1,051 terawatt-hour have been produced from renewable sources during that year. The first renewable sector for electricity production was wind power with 377 terawatt-hours, and the second one was hydropower. The third was biomass. Biomass is gathering solid biomass, biogas, and municipal solid waste. And photovoltaic comes in fourth position with 128 terawatt-hours. The bar chart presenting to the right side of the screen shows the renewable electricity share of each member state, and this share can vary considerably depending on the renewable energy potential of each country and the support policies. Concerning countries' position, 14 member states are above a threshold of 30% of RES in their electricity generation, and 5 are above a 50% share. At the bottom of the graph, 4 countries are under a 10% share. On the next slide is you can see information about heat and cooling generation. So With 102.9 million of ton oil equivalent, renewable sectors has reached 19.7 share in 2018. This situation is very similar to the one observed in 2017, where the share was assessed at 19.5. The evolution of this indicator is directly linked to the development of renewable sectors, but its analysis is made difficult by the succession of mild winters in Europe, a consequence of global warming. Indeed, the heating needs are directly correlated with the average temperature level. Regarding heat and cooling consumption, solid biomass remains the main sector with 79 million TOE, almost 77% of total renewable heat production in Europe. And not surprisingly, the renewable shares in heat consumption is higher in forest countries, especially those located in the northern part of Europe. If we take a look at the global picture in the right side of the screen, 13 member states are above 30% threshold for raising their heat consumption, and 4 are above 50% share. At the opposite, 5 countries are under a 10% share. Now, if we move to the next slide, it's about the renewable sources in gross final energy consumption, which remains the main European objective for RES development. The 2018 results is 18%. 1 year before, this share was 17.5%. The European Union is only 2 points to go to meet its 2020 target. Over the last 14 years, this share more than doubled as compared to 2004, where the reach level was 8.5%. If we move to the next slide, it's the rest of the European country situation. And we can see that each European member state has its own 2020 target. The national targets make allowance with the starting point situation differences, as well as the renewable energy potentials, ambitions, and economic performance specific to the member states. At the end of 2018, 12 member states have already met their European target for 2020. But despite most of the countries are on track to make their own target, the 20% overall target will be very hard to meet, because the current growth pace across the European Union is too slow to achieve the 2020 target. While it dropped to 0.5% during the last year, meaning 2017 and 2019, it should be at least 1 point for the next 2 years to achieve the final target. So every member state has to stay focused on their own effort and trajectory. But however, for the near future, one of the main concerns today is with the COVID pandemic and the European worldwide economic situation, is a fear to see some countries or European regions trying to relaunch their industry and economic activity with reduced environmental and renewable energy ambitions. Okay, thank you. That's all right for me. That's all for me.
Thank you very much, Frederic, for these insights on the energy indicators. I quickly skip over to the socio-economic sections of our report and to TNO. So, Sam, are you there to tell us more about the job impacts of renewables in the European Union?
Yes, thank you, Roman. Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Lambeau. I'm a renewable energy researcher at TNO Energy Transition. Today I will be talking about the socio-economic analysis. Since 2017, we have been using a modeling approach to estimate the turnover and employment effects from both the installation and operation of renewable energy technologies in European member states. Turnover and employment effects are the main two outputs, which I will be talking about today. The mathematical approach we've been using since 2017 provides more consistency across years, across member states, and across technologies compared to the use of literature studies and country surveys on which the socioeconomic analysis was based on before 2017. For the 2019 edition, as we do each year, key input data for each member state was updated. Some examples of key input data include the amount of megawatts installed of solar PV, for example, but also the import and export of wind turbine parts. Our analysis this year shows a slight increase in both turnover and in employment in 2018 compared to 2017. The estimates for 2018 are 159 billion euros in turnover and just over 1.5 million jobs in 2018. Wind, solid biomass, and heat pumps are the largest sectors in terms of turnover. And as you can see in the charts, it's small. Germany, France, and Spain are the largest countries in terms of turnover, but also in terms of employment in the European Union. To summarize the most notable changes in 2018 compared to 2017, the largest growth in jobs was observed in the heat pumps, in the solar PV, and the biofuels sectors. A decline in jobs was observed in the wind sector, led by a significant decrease mostly in Germany. However, as I indicated before, Germany, Spain, and France are also the largest countries in terms of employment. Overall, though, as indicated in the previous slide, we see a slight increase in jobs in the EU in 2018. That was it from my side, so I would want to hand back to Roman.
Thank you very much, Sam. Without further delay, what you see that Karol Kemper is our next speaker from Frankfurt School. He's talking about the investment indicators and the latest results there. Karol.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you, Roman, for the kind introduction. So let's dive into the investment indicators. So what we do in this part of the overview barometer, we focus on the financing side of renewable energies and on several different aspects. So we look at investments in renewable energy capacity. We look a bit in the investments into RES firms, so mainly at venture capital and private equity funds being invested in new startup firms. Then we look at the performance of renewable energy firms and assets on stock markets, and a bit separate from the overview barometer, we also do case studies of innovative financing schemes that I will briefly introduce to you at the end of my presentation here. So just to give you a brief glimpse, starting with investments in renewable energy capacity, what we do here is we estimate investments in renewable energy capacity. So this is investments in plants with capacity larger than 1 megawatt in all 28 EU member states. And to give you a brief few results from the newest reports we have, so overall the renewable energy investments in capacity increased from 27 billion euros 2017 to 31.5 billion in 2018. And well, the picture is quite heterogeneous if you compare different RES sectors. So this is just summarized here in the graph on the right-hand side. So what you can see for both years is that wind investments, and particularly onshore, dominate. They're by far the largest, and there's quite a few changes between both years. For example, PV investments increased by a large amount. They more than doubled for 2.3 to almost 4.8 billion. and geothermal investments also increased by quite a bit. Go to the next slide. Yeah, to sum it up, what we have actually in the report is we report the investments per member state. What you can see on the right-hand side, this is the example for wind investments onshore and offshore together. So what we present in the report is investment by member state, how much was invested, how much capacity is associated with this, and how many new projects were registered. So what we can see here is that in 2018, for example, we saw the largest investments in the United Kingdom and Sweden, for example. And we present this for the other renewable energy sectors as well in the report. What else? Another thing that we do that fits to this area of renewable energy investment is that we compare the investment costs. More precisely, we calculate the average investment expenditures in million euros per megawatt of capacity and compare this, those costs of the EU with main EU trading partners for different technologies. And you can see in the graphs our results just for solar PV and onshore wind. So what you can see here is that for solar PV, for example, the investment expenditures, investment costs decreased substantially between both years. The same happened also in main trading partners of the EU, but in both years the investment costs were lower in the European Union. A relatively similar picture we observe for onshore wind, so we can also see a decreasing trend in the investment costs of this technology. However, in 2018, the cost decreased stronger for trading partners in the EU. So in 2018, wind onshore investments were slightly more expensive in the EU, while the opposite could be observed the year before. And again, in the report, we present this also for other technologies as well. Yeah, to come to the second part, just a brief glimpse, investments in renewable energy firms. So as I already indicated here, we present some estimates on venture capital and private equity investments. So private equity and venture capital funds investing into typically very new startup technology companies. And overall, we observed that those investments increased quite a lot between both years, from 1.6 billion to 2.4 billion in 2018. And we can see the highest investments in the solar sector in both years. So similar. Basically, in the last years, it was always solar or wind with the highest investments in this area. And finally, we also look at the, as I said, the performance of renewable energy firms and assets on public markets. Here's just a glimpse on our analysis of renewable energy firms. So what we do is we collect, we research the largest firms per sector that we can find that are listed on stock markets and are mainly or only engaged in this specific sector. Then we construct stock indices just to look how those firms perform, to compare those technologies with each other, and to also compare it to the general market in the EU. And what we can see here just briefly is that the bioenergy and wind firms performed relatively better compared to firms from the solar sector that had a rather difficult 2 years. But again, more analysis on that in the report. And as I said briefly, it's not part of the report, but also related to investment. We have those case studies on innovative financing schemes that are published annually in September. So the newest case studies that were published in 2019 on the role of green power purchase agreements, on green bonds and their role for renewable energy investments. And we looked at investments in innovation in renewable energy and looked at the case of InnoEnergy. So if you're interested in this, also further older case studies you can find on our website. Okay, so that's it for me, and I would hand back to Roman. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carol. As I have indicated in the chat as well, please, for the audience, please type your questions if you have any questions on the information provided, so we can get back to it directly in the chat or at the end of this presentation. Meanwhile, I hand over to Luke Berskens, also from TNO Energy Transition. He talks about the costs and prices and cost competitiveness of renewables. Luke, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Roman. I'm there. So, first First of all, I want to stress that there are no single technology costs throughout the European Union, of course, for renewables. But of course, we see cost ranges varying across countries and across technologies. The parameters that we used in our publication for estimating the renewable cost is the levelized cost of energy, which we abbreviate as LCOE. The picture at the right here displays the estimated renewable energy production costs in blue color, and the graph also compares these to the energy prices of the relevant conventional energy carriers, the pink color, that is. For the LCOE estimations, we use the following underlying parameters, among others, capital and operational expenditures, fuel costs, and annual energy production. The conventional energy carrier prices are based on statistical sources, and these exclude taxes, levies, and external costs. For heat, also efficiencies were used to quantify the prices. And the country dependency, finally, was modeled using country-specific energy yields and country-specific biomass prices and weighted average costs of capital that also differed across the countries. And in our annual publication, The State of Renewables, we also present the modeled LCOEs for historic years, 2005 and 2010. So focusing now on the outcomes for 2018, as reported in the graph at the right, solid biomass power, deep geothermal power, and hydropower are most competitive in comparison to wholesale electricity prices, and large-scale commercial PV and wind power may in some countries compete with electricity prices. For assessing competitiveness of residential PV, taxes and levies should be taken into account for a fair comparison. The least expensive option for heat production is solid biomass, and from our analysis it follows also that the costs for renewable transport fuels are above the reference prices such as gasoline and diesel. Then the next topic, the estimated avoided fossil fuel use and the resulting avoided fossil fuel expenses. The avoided fossil fuels in this analysis have been defined as non-renewable energy carriers that are not consumed, so mostly fossil fuels displaced by renewables. We estimated the cumulative amounts of avoided fossil fuels, and we multiplied these by the corresponding fuel price levels observed in the various countries of the European Union to find the cumulative avoided costs. For 2017, the European Union amount of avoided fossil fuels was estimated at 329.9 megaton oil equivalent, resulting in avoided expenses at an amount of 89 billion euro. And for the year 2018, the avoided fossil fuels increased to 351.3 megaton oil equivalent, which resulted then in 110.4 billion euro avoided expenses in that year. The pie chart at the right shows that the largest contribution is from solid biomass in heat generation and from electricity from hydro and wind power. The 2009 edition of the State of Renewables presents more detail behind the analysis. Thank you all, and Roman, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Luke, for these figures and interpretations of the data. I hand over to our last speaker, which is Barbara Breitschow from Fraunhofer EC, to speak on trade of renewable energy technologies as well as the flexibility of the electricity systems. Barbara, your turn.
Thank you, Roma. Welcome to everybody. I'd like to share some of our insights of our analysis with you. First, I'd like to have a look with you at the international trade of renewable energy technologies. Here in this figure, you see the international trade shares
in renewable energy technologies, which we use as a proxy for the competitiveness of those countries in those technology fields. Depicted is the trade volume of one country in relation to the globally traded volume of the respective technology, for example, in PV. The data for 2018 were not complete at the time we did our analysis, so we have to look at the 2017 data, but nevertheless, we see an interesting picture. So what do we see? We see a strong position of China in overall renewable energy technologies, with a slight increase again after a decrease. Then we see the US as a stronger trading partner, and Japan display slightly increasing shares, while the EU countries show a rather mixed picture, some stagnating, some decreasing, some increasing. When we zoom into the technology, we see that China is especially strong in PV and in hydro, and is trying to catch up in wind power as well. The US is only strong in the biofuel fields, second there, and Japan has some strength in PV, but overall the countries not depicted here has also some strength in PV. The EU is still very strong in wind power, especially Denmark, Germany, and Spain. It's also competitive in biofuels, for example, Netherlands, France, Hungary, but other countries as well. It is strong in hydropower, especially Italy and Austria, but there are again some other countries. And it's also second in PV, especially Netherlands and Germany. Overall, the EU strength is wind power and is still competitive, but it's slightly losing shares. So that's the overall picture we got from our look at the trade shares. Next, I'd like to share with you some insights from the heating and cooling sector. And here you see the market sales shares. They depict the shares of the heating technology sold in the EU in 2018 as a percentage of the total heating systems sold. So they show the dynamics at the current edge of the heating sector. And there we have some bad news and some good news. The bad ones from the perspective of renewables is that conventional and fuel-based heating systems are still very dominating in sales. That is especially bad when we look at a long life cycle of 20 years. And biomass shows a rather low dynamics. Also, it is very dominant in the heating sector. The good news is that their heat pumps are in some countries very successful in the market, especially in Scandinavian and the Baltic states. And solar energy shows some level of dynamics in Cyprus and Greece. So these are the good news at the current edge of this technology in the heating sector. When we have a look at the consumption shares, there we see more the status, the overall status. They depict the shares of heating they depict the consumption of energy by technology or fuel source compared to the total energy consumption for heating and cooling. Overall, we see very slow changes as it takes a long time to get adjusted. And so it's clear that fossil fuel-based heating systems are still dominating the heating systems in many countries. But in some countries, biomass and heat pumps play already a significant role. Especially biomass is the most important renewable energy source in heating and cooling. And the contribution of district heating is high in some European countries. But of course, it depends on the mix in district heating. And there we have another look at the energy supply mix in district heating, where we'll depict here the shares of the energy carrier sources used to generate heat in district heating. I should note that the selected countries here cover at least 10% of their heating and hot water demand by this district heating. So countries with lower shares are not depicted here. What you can see here is that Austria and some Baltic and Scandinavian countries use a large share of biomass or biofuels, and that the share of coal and petroleum is still very high in other countries and in the EU average. That's a bad message. Overall, there is some movement, some development in the heating sector, but it's modest or slow. Finally, I'd like to share with you the results in the flexibility analysis. Why we are looking at the flexibility? Well, the more variable renewable energy technology we use for electricity generation, the more the system needs to be able to adjust to the fluctuating generation. And so you see at the first figure where we depict the installed variable renewable energy capacities of the countries as percentage of the overall generating capacity. There you see that, for example, Denmark or Germany or UK and some other countries have relatively high shares in those capacities. And we assume that especially those countries are facing challenges or challenge their electricity system and need some degree of flexibility. So what is our approach when we look at flexibility? First, we are looking at critical hours. We define those critical hours as the hour with the largest deviation of predicted consumption or load and generation to the actual demand and generation. And we look at the share of flexible generation used in those critical hours. This is depicted in the second figure here in the slide. There you see how much of the flexible generation has been used in those critical hours where the deviation has been highest. And we see that many countries like Belgium, Bulgaria, Spain, France, Poland, Slovenia, they have reached almost 100% of their flexibility capacity to adjust the generation to the demand in that time, in those critical hours. So they have somehow reached the limit of their domestic generation capacity. But we also looked at further mechanisms how to adjust that. There are mechanisms for example, intraday markets, the trade, import or export, and the reserve market, which is a regulated market. And on my last slide, we have depicted the intraday market. There you see the share of the traded volume at the critical hours in those markets compared to the maximum traded volume in those intraday markets in the respective year. Our finding is that only in a few countries the traded share in those in the intraday market during those critical hours is high. That's, for example, in Germany, it's around 80% of the maximum value, while the others, most of them are below 50%. So this shows that the overall significance of the intraday market as a mechanism to adjust the generation in critical hours still seems to be moderate. So there's still room for a better exploitment of the potential of the intraday markets. And so design of the intraday markets become maybe more and more important. And with this main message, I'd like to close the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for these final slides of our presentation. Wow, so this is a lot of information packed into 1 hour. So again, I firstly like to encourage you to type some questions that occur to you at this moment in the chat in the right hand box on at the bottom in the chat where you can ask some questions and we might immediately respond to that. If you want to have more details, then of course you have the opportunity to download our report, The State of Renewable Energies, on our website. It's www.EurObserv'ER.org. There you also will soon find this presentation, and all the data provided are also accessible and freely downloadable in our EurObserv'ER database. So you can freely download that and use for own publications or cite us. That is very welcome. We are glad to share these data with you. So have a look at the website, and if you want to download stuff. Meanwhile, I see that there is one question about the international trade. Barbara, I think that is directed at you. Eva asks, concerning the international trade of renewable energy, do you have more details on the technology in PV, in photovoltaic? Is it more polycrystalline or more monocrystalline modules which are traded internationally? Do you have any breakdowns of that?
Thank you for this question, and it's very interesting. Unfortunately, we are not able to break that down. We rely on the UN Comtrade database, on the trade classifications there. We could not get the information whether what share is poly or monocrystalline, for example. So we don't know what a trade is. We only know a little bit. We only have a little bit information about the type of installations, but I don't have them ready at hand now. Sorry for that.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I hope Eva Eva is typing again. Ask that. Is there more questions from the audience, from the chat, you would like to raise at this point concerning the energy data or the job figures or the avoided fossil fuels or imports, about the heating technologies, about the flexibility? Anything at this point? Here's one from Mohammed. Due to the recent events in the oil market, have the economic justifications for investing in new energy not changed? Maybe I can direct that to Carol. Carol, could you say a word about investment conditions in relation to the oil price hikes, and the recent lows we have witnessed?
Yeah, I can at least try to comment something. Thank you for this very interesting question. I think it's very, very difficult to say, because normally I would say, like, in particularly when oil prices are high, what we expect them to become more and more, the investment conditions for renewable energy should be better. Now the oil prices are very low, but on the other hand, and during the Corona crisis, I mean, in general, the economies are in a recession. So I would say that this year will be definitely a difficult one for renewable energy investments. The conditions won't be good, but it will be difficult, in my opinion, now spontaneously to disentangle what is caused by oil prices and what is caused by the overall economic recession. That's what I can say to that spontaneously.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I see another question by Jaime Mora. What do you think about the future of diesel? Well, okay, primarily I think this project is more about monitoring of renewable energy sources in electricity and heat. So this is not, we are not market observers of the fossil fuel, transport fuel markets, but does anyone feel confident to respond on that? Frederic, maybe on diesel? I'm not sure if we can really respond to that.
Yes, Roman, as you said, our work is more dedicated to monitoring the evolution of future sectors. But if the question is about biodiesel, in our thematic barometers dedicated to biofuels, there is a part of course, about biodiesel. Regarding the policy implemented to promote this sector and the results for each European countries. So Jaime could find some information about that, but true is there is no real real part dedicated to what could be the future biodiesel trend in each country. It's more about the results observed.
Yeah, thanks, Frederic, for clarifying that. Indeed, I just filled in the chat the download link to the full report, which you can access. Of course, there's more details about all renewable energy technologies and all the data again, and hopefully that will answer more open questions from you. Is there anything else to ask at this point? I do not see any more questions popping up at this point. Diane, do you want to say a word as well to the audience or another concluding remark?
Just regarding diesel, one can only hope that currently government, they do have a strong card in their hands, at least in Europe, since they are building whole recovery plan with a lot of fundings, some of which will probably go in the automotive industry. And we can only hope that they will use this card to enhance and incentivize investments in clean technologies for cars and technologies that will lessen the use of diesel and promote the use of biodiesel and clean fuels such as hydrogen when it's green. When it's produced with renewable energies, and electricity cars.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Oh, I see that some more questions are popping up. There's one about offshore. Can offshore wind power be turned into renewable power in Europe? Actually, it is. It is turned. Offshore wind power is gaining momentum and is growing. If you have a look at our wind barometer, there's also a dedicated section, offshore wind power, and the European Union is still one of the leading world regions using and applying offshore wind power. So look at the statistics in the report and in the wind barometer. Another question was from Bhargya, talking about the development about different methods for cooling solar panels to increase the efficiency. I'm not specifically an expert for solar for cooling methods for solar panels. Does anyone feel confident to respond to that? Maybe Frederic, but I'm not sure.
I'm not an expert and I don't know much about technology. I just got a recent message about researchers about efficiency results in the US. The National Research Energy Laboratory in the US, they have reached a new efficiency level of 50% by using different materials for different layers of PV. So they're not looking at cooling methodologies or methods or approaches, but they use different materials and apply them at different layers on the module silicon. And so they have increased the efficiency to about 50%, which is really high. Well, it's still at the development stage, but this is, I think, very interesting.
Yes, and thank you, Barbara. Let me also say a few words about that question about cooling solar panels. It might refer to the combination of solar PV and solar thermal collectors, also called PVT, where the idea is if you extract heat that you use in a functional way, so you use the heat to cool actually the solar PV panels, you have an increase in electricity generation efficiency. And so a number that I could mention is that it might have an additional electricity yield of, say, 5%, perhaps 10%, but that is also very much dependent on how much heat you can extract from these panels during summer. So because you need to have a heat demand at the same time. That's what I would like to add to this question.
Thank you very much, Luke. What I see is a final question before we close this webinar and the Q&A section. Eva has again asked, how is the prospect of selling international trade for solar PV in Southeast countries? I'm not specifically sure if it's Southeast European countries or if it's Southeast Asian countries or other region. So I'm not entirely sure. I assume in this case it would rather be Southeastern Europe. So trade, Barbara, do you have any figures in your head concerning Southeastern Europe, specifics on trading PV in that region?
No, not that. No, I don't remember exactly, and I have problems open my documents at the moment because I'm connected to you. The line is too weak. But what I know is that there is some potential for solar PV, and also for thermal solar, and they are working on that. It's in Southeastern Europe, for example, Greece, their shares are increasing, and Cyprus, they're increasing, of course, and we expect, of course, that this will go on, keep going, because the potential is large, and it's more or less a question of the economic situation and financing still, and less of the potential. That was the question. I don't know whether this is the answer we expected to get.
No, yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, I think I call it a day at this point. We have reached the end of this live webinar, EurObserv'ER live webinar. Thank you to all the attendees and participants. Thanks to the speakers. And I would really like to point again at our website where you can review this webinar and download all the barometers and all the market reports that have been mentioned. The annual report that sums up all the single technology market reports. It's all for free. It's all download. So use it as a reference or for your work whenever you like. If you have questions, you can of course get back to us as well. Have a look at our website, check the reports, send us feedbacks, and well, hope that you enjoy our product and our market reports, and get in touch with you in the next months or weeks again, and see you next year at this the next live webinar of EurObserv'ER.
And yes, don't forget to enter your email address in our website if you want to receive some news about the project productions. And I thank you everybody who has stayed with us until the end. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And thank you very much, all presenters, and Roman especially, for the very good moderation of this webinar. Thanks to all the RENAC team for the technical support. Bye-bye. Have a very nice day, and take care.